The rain started the moment the car doors opened, fat drops exploding against marble like a curse. Marina Contreras stepped out last, the silver locket warm against her skin, as if it remembered him, the man whose name could open a bank vault or close a life. Inside the notary's chamber, everything was polished to intimidation. Brass lamps, walnut paneling, a conference table that looked long enough to seat a dynasty. 4 chairs were occupied. Already, 4 pairs of eyes turned, assessed, and measured. Alejandro Villalobos sat at the head, because of course he did, broad-shouldered, self-possessed, the sort of man who breathed in numbers and exhaled decisions. To his right, Natalia, sleek as a blade, lips already pressed into disapproval. Across from her, Daniel, cufflinks flashing like sirens, ambition arranged neatly on his face. And leaning back at the far end, Valeria, a smile like a glass of cold water you couldn't swallow. The notary, Martin Valverde, cleared his throat. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Don Arturo Villalobos." His gaze flickered to Marina, then back to the document. "All heirs named in the instrument are present." "Heirs," Natalia repeated softly, eyes cutting toward Marina. "How generous the dictionary has become." Marina didn't react. She slid into the remaining chair, her palms flat on the table to keep them from curling into fists. The locket, his locket, she had been told rested in the notch of her collarbone, a small moon under the room's patient light. Martin began. Legal preface, identity clauses, the slow drumbeat of assets that sounded like countries, hotels, media shares, construction firms, a latticework of companies stitched across continents. Each syllable marched forward, and with each one the room seemed to shrink, as though the will itself was a tide moving in. "Before we proceed to distributions," Martin said, voice tightening, "Don Arturo left a directive concerning residency and coexistence." Daniel scoffed. "Of course he did." Martin read, careful as a surgeon. "None of my children may claim their inheritance until they reside together for a minimum of 6 months in the family residence at Valle de Bravo. During this period, they must jointly administer the minor operations of the group. If any one of them abandons the residence before the period ends, their share is forfeited." Natalia's laugh was brittle. "He's dead and he's still arranging our cages." Alejandro's jaw worked once, a clean, controlled tick. "Legally enforceable?" "Regrettably, yes," Martin said. "The clause is binding." Marina kept her eyes on the paper, but she could feel the currents shifting, the table turning into a chessboard in real time. She hadn't come for this to be caged with wolves, but wolves had raised her in absence, and she knew how to keep her throat out of their teeth. "And if one abandons," Valeria drawled, "their share goes too." Martin turned a page. "It does not revert to the remaining heirs. Don Arturo names a separate beneficiary, to be disclosed only if the clause is triggered or at the end of the 6-month period." Alejandro leaned forward, named. "I'm not authorized to reveal it." Martin's fingers tightened on the folder. Those were Don Arturo's explicit instructions. Silence fell, dense and humid. Somewhere beyond the windows, the rain gathered itself and hit harder, a steady percussion. "Convenient," Daniel muttered. "A ghost heir." Marina felt the locket pulse once. A trick of blood or memory, she couldn't say. She thought of a hospital corridor, of her mother's, hand squeezing hers, of a name that had always been a continent away. She had nearly turned back this morning, nearly folded the paper with the address and thrown it into the drain. Instead, she had come, because fear was a habit she was trying to break. Martin resumed, voice even. "There are further provisions regarding oversight of the residency, weekly sign-ins, cooperative duties, and transparency measures." He paused. "Don Arturo also left a personal memorandum to be opened at Valle de Bravo on your first night together, like a party favor," Valeria said pleasantly. "How thoughtful." Alejandro looked at Marina across the long, gleaming table. It wasn't cruelty in his eyes, worse. It was assessment. Will she break? Will she bargain? Will she run? Marina straightened. "I'll go to Valle de Bravo." Natalia's chair screeched back. "You don't get to decide." "I'm not deciding for you," Marina said, and her voice surprised even herself with how steady it was. "I'm deciding for me." Daniel's smile was quick and mean. You think this is a story where the outsider wins because she believes in herself. Marina let the words land and evaporate. I think this is a story where the outsider stops being an outsider the moment she walks through the right door. Valeria's eyes brightened, interest unfurling like smoke. That's almost charming. Martin closed the folder. There's one more item. Don Arturo directed that any heir who disputes the validity of another heir's status may do so, but such a challenge must be accompanied by immediate DNA testing for all parties and will delay distributions by an additional 6 months. Daniel swore under his breath. Natalia looked ready. To Alejandro exhaled a single measured inch. So, either we live together, or we live together even longer. Precisely, Martin said. No one stood, no one moved. The storm kept beating its fist against the windows. Marina touched the locket. When she spoke again, she spoke to the room, to the title, to the man beneath the ground who had written a maze and dared them to walk it. I didn't come here to steal anything, she said. I came to claim what he already put in motion. A gaze didn't soften, but it shifted, a fraction toward respect. Natalia's mouth thinned. Daniel's eyes went colder. Valeria's smile sharpened. Valet de Bravo. Then, Alejandro said, rising at last. 6 months. 6 months, Valeria echoed, as if tasting the time. Daniel picked up his coat like a verdict. Natalia gathered her fury. Marina stood without ceremony, the locket a small weight, the will a larger one. As they filed out into the rain. The city blurred behind the wipers, and the road to the lake unrolled like a sentence already written. Marina watched the storm, and let it wash the tremor out of her bones. 6 months with wolves. She had learned to move quietly in the dark. She would learn to lead there, and if this was a cage, she thought, fastening her seatbelt, then she would be the one to find the door and decide who got to walk through it. The mountains folded around the lake like a sleeping animal, all muscle and shadow. By dusk, the convoy turned off the main road and climbed a long stone-lined drive. Val de Bravo rose out of the mist, the Villa Lobos residence, white walls, black slate, glass that watched you back. It wasn't a house, it was a verdict. The front doors opened before anyone knocked. Alessio, the butler Marina had only heard about, stood immaculate in charcoal. He looked as if he'd been built with the house and simply wound every morning. Welcome home, he said, to all of them and to none of them. Per Don Arturo's instructions, your suites have been aired. There is a memorandum to be read at 8 o'clock in the main salon. Weekly sign-ins are Thursdays, 9 a.m., at this same location. Of course, Natalia muttered, stepping past him as if the floor owed her apologies. Valeria trailed a hand along the carved banister. He left us a bedtime story. How considerate. Daniel peeled off toward the study without a word. Alejandro paused at the threshold, then glanced back. Marina was still on the gravel, hand tight on the handle of her small, stubborn suitcase, the only thing she owned that could withstand this driveway. He waited to beats. When she didn't move, he said, "You'll learn the house faster if it doesn't learn you first." She wasn't sure what that meant, but she crossed the threshold anyway. The air inside smelled like wax and cedar. Portraits climbed the stairwell. Arturo in 3 decades, 3 suits, 3 expressions of conquest. Between them, landscapes of places the family owned and likely never loved. Eliseo led Marina down a broad corridor that softened into a quieter wing. He opened a door on the lakeside. The room was pared back white linen, dark wood, a tall window that made the water look like a rumor. On the dresser sat a square, velvet-lined box. Elsinore requested this be placed in your room upon arrival. Eliseo said. His face didn't flicker. If you require anything, ring. When the door clicked, the silence had temperature. Marina set her suitcase down and crossed to the box. Inside, on black velvet, lay a single jeweled brass, notched asymmetrically, and a note in Arturo's measured hand. Use it when the house is loud. Loud. She looked at the window. The lake held its breath. The house echoed its own bones. At 7:59 she entered the main salon, fire coiled behind glass. The others were already there, drinks like shields. Eliseo stood beside a credenza, where a thin envelope waited under a paperweight shaped like a compass. 8 o'clock, he said, and lifted the weight. Alejandro took the envelope, broke the seal, and unfolded a single page. To my children, he read, voice neutral. I congratulate you on doing what you hate, being under one roof. You'll find I've left guardrails. You'll also find holes. I recommend you decide which is which. The residency will be certified weekly by signature in the ledger kept by Eliso. Failure to sign is abandonment. Should you wish to contest parentage, the clinic in town has my instructions. I advise against it if your objective is speed. Daniel made a sound like a knife put down too hard. Alejandro kept reading. This house has 3 rules. First, no staff shall serve as messengers, spies, or allies. Fire them and you'll deal with me from wherever I am. Second, the minor operations you'll manage are real, not plaything. Break one, and you will clean it up yourselves. Third, every week, one of you will chair a Sunday operations dinner with minutes recorded and circulated. You choose the order. If you cannot tolerate each other for a meal, you do not deserve what follows. Let me guess, Natalia said. There's more. Alejandro's gaze flicked to the last lines. Lastly, there is a personal memorandum in the library. Safe combination known to none of you. The combination will appear when you've proven you can find it. The house is louder than you think. A cryptic to the end, Valeria sighed happily, and insufferable. The ledger arrived. A leather book as old as any of them. Ruled lines waiting to be owned. They signed in order of birth. Natalia. Daniel then paused. Valeria's pen hovered. She looked up at Marina. Smile lazy. After me, little sister. Marina didn't flinch. She signed with letters clean and economical. Marina Contreras. The name left the groove. House. Matters, Alejandro said, closing the ledger. We split the minor ops by portfolio. Marina leases, boutique retail, local vendors, and hull maintenance. Pass, Natalia said. I don't do boats. You do now. Daniel snapped. It's called minor for a reason. Valeria tilted her head. I'll take boutique retail. It smells like perfume and solvency. Local vendors, Alejandro said. Daniel, hull maintenance is yours. Natalia, Marina leases. Marina, he stopped, eyes narrowing as if measuring a blade. You'll coordinate reporting for all 4. Neutral position, see everything. Natalia's laugh was immediate. Put her at the center. You're joking. She's the only one without a pre-existing fief, Alejandro said evenly. If it's a problem, switch with her. Silence. Natalia's jaw ticked. Valeria's mouth curved. Daniel looked at the window like he wished the lake would climb in and drown them all. Meeting adjourned, Alejandro said. Sunday dinner, Valeria. You chair. Minutes to follow. They dispersed like shrapnel. Marina remained until the fire got loud enough to sound like an idea. Back in her room, the lake was a darker stripe. The house was louder. Not voices. Not footsteps. The particular hum of old infrastructure vents. Groaning beams. The whisper of water under stone. She held the key up to the window light, the brass throwing back a dull sun. When the house is loud. She left the room without shoes. The corridor's runner drank her steps. At the far end, a narrow flight descended, not grand enough to be important, which made it interesting. She followed the hum down past shuttered guest rooms, through a door that sighed open into the old library, 2 stories of books, a rolling ladder, a stone hearth that didn't believe in glass. Loud here. The vents hissed like gossip. The paneling creaked on its own schedule. She walked the perimeter, ran her fingers along spines that smelled like dust and decisions. The key didn't fit the obvious desk drawers, cabinet locks. The house kept up its mutter. She crouched beside the hearth, brass grate, stone lintel in the ash drawer, nothing but cold soot and a dead moth. She closed it and heard, faint, a click behind the north wall, not the wall, the case, the 4th shelf, 6 books in, a section that didn't quite sit flush. Marina slid the key along the gap. The brass kissed something iron and stopped. She pressed the shelf, released with a gentle exhale. Swinging inward on hidden hinges, a narrow void waited behind it. At the far end, a steel faceplate and a dialode, heavy and very sure of itself. No combination, only a thin slit above the dial. the shape of an old key. She lifted the brass again. The notes, 6 words, thrumming in her fingers. Use it when the house is loud. She slid the key into the slit. The metal resisted, then yielded. Somewhere inside the mechanism, the house's hum vibrated up the brass and into her palm. The dial twitched. Numbers whispered, awake. She didn't breathe. She turned the dial with the rhythm of the vents. Hiss, 12, 40, 26, 9. The final notch fell with a soft, satisfied click behind her. A board creaked. Marina didn't turn. She pulled the safe door open. Inside lay a slim envelope with her name, a leather notebook, and a photograph of Arturo, younger, standing at this same hearth with a blue ink date scrawled beneath. The envelope's flap was sealed. The notebook's first page was stamped with a single word in block letters. Aurora. Curious hour for sightseeing, Valeria said from the doorway, voice smooth as melted glass. Marina closed her hand over the envelope without looking back. Couldn't sleep. Valeria stepped closer, heels soft on the old rug, eyes on the words stamped like a warning. Neither could I. The house was loud, now fire vents, root-deep timber. Inside Marina's chest, something louder answered. Valeria didn't cross the threshold. She leaned into it, framed by shelves and shadow, the kind of woman doorways were built for. The word on the notebook Aurora seemed to heat the air. Find something good, she asked. Marina slid the envelope and notebook into the cavity of the safe again, set the photograph on top like a lid, and turned the dial back to 0. The shelf swung closed with the hush of a secret reshelved. Only dust, Marina said. Valeria's smile acknowledged the lie without caring. The house is a maze, and Arturo loved mazes. I prefer straight lines. She tilted her head. You and Alejandro make interesting angles. So do you in Trouble, Marina said, stepping past her. Valeria matched pace down the corridor. Sunday dinner, my chair. You'll find I run a clean table and a dirty agenda. Bring something worth discussing. What would that be? Oh, you know. Valeria's eyes glinted. Anything labeled Aurora. They reached the landing where the portraits watched in oil. Valeria's voice softened, sudden as velvet. Careful, little sister. The house isn't the only thing that's loud. So are debts. Then she was gone, absorbed by a side hall like the house had swallowed her name. Back in her room, Marina locked the door twice. She waited long enough for the silence to settle, then took the brass key from her pocket and pressed it, flat under the lamp hot still, as if the safe had a pulse. She laid the envelope on the desk and cracked the seal. Arturo's handwriting marched across the page in blue ink, precise as a metronome. If you opened the safe, you heard the house. Good. You'll need to listen. Aurora is not an asset. It's an axis. Use the notebook. Do not copy it. Do not hand it to a lawyer. If your siblings sniff at its edges, let them. You will know who is useful by who asks the wrong questions. A word on allies. Trust the one who hates losing more than they love winning. The rest are seasonal. When the Marina books don't match, do not shout. Follow the smallest number. She read it twice, then a third time, each line resoldering something in her that the day had melted. Arturo's voice was colder than memory, but it held a practical mercy. Instructions were a kind of care. She opened the leather notebook. The first page after the stamped title carried a hand-drawn circle divided into 3 wedges, labeled citizens, water, light. Beneath each, lists. Small grants with dates and towns she recognized. Pilot contracts with schools in states that had never heard the Villalobos name spoken without a curse. A cluster of startups, all early stage, all building quietly desalination membranes, battery recycling, low-cost grid sensors, page after page rough budgets, contact initials, a calendar, anchored not to quarters, but to seasons. No offshore accounts, no games, a line in the margins. Build where the empire never looked. When the meeting broke, Natalia cornered Marina at the corridor bend, where the morning light came in like a blade. You think we don't see you, she said. You think that locket buys you gravity. This house eats light. Contreras. Marina stepped out of the light so they were both in shadow. Houses are made of choices and money. I'm good with one of those. Which one? Natalia's smile was all enamel. the one that keeps you from setting fires you can't put out. She left Natalia there, smiling at nothing. The marina was 20 minutes downhill, a low spread of docks and offices smelling of brine and gasoline. The office manager, a woman named Terry with sleeves rolled to her elbows, slid the logbook across the counter. "You're the new one," Terry said, studying Marina like weather. "We heard a sister fell out of the sky. Floated in," Marina said, "from the other side of your lake." Terry's mouth almost smiled. "Good. I don't trust people who drive to water." They worked the numbers for an hour. Marina traced the 47 peso discrepancy backward through 3 days, then into a purchase order for bolts that never arrived, then to a vendor code that paired to 2 different names depending on which system you looked at. One was a legitimate supply shop in town. The other was a new entry with a post office box and a fee schedule that rounded in the wrong direction. "That's not error," Terry said. "That's a mouth. Small mouths get fat," Marina said. "Who approved the vendor?" Terry's eyes went to the window. "No one, officially. The code showed up after midnight last week. Our system doesn't sleep that late unless somebody keeps it up. Access logs. Local logs say no." Terry lowered her voice. "We keep a paper copy of everything important," El Señor insisted. "You want to see the real book?" Marina did. In the back room, the paper ledger told a cleaner story than the screen clean, but not quiet. 3 small sums shaved thin, regular as breath. She photographed nothing. She took notes by hand. On the way out, a boy in a faded life jacket darted in, breathless. "Senora Terry, the blue hole is loose again. The line won't hold." Terry was already moving. Marina followed, boots thudding on planks. At Dock C, a mid-size cruiser bucked against a frayed rope, nose kissing the fender with impatient violence. Daniel stood there, arms crossed, yelling instructions that sounded like blame. "You were supposed to replace that line." He barked at a worker who had the expression of a man learning to hate rope. "It was replaced," the man said. "But, the cleat, give me a knife," Marina said. Daniel turned, steam coming off him. "We're handling it." "You're issuing commands," Marina said, dropping to one knee. "Handling is different." She cut the frayed line, looped the slack through the second cleat, retied with a bowline so clean a sailor would have, nodded, and signaled the worker to ease the throttle. The boat settled against the fender like a big animal deciding not to fight. Daniel stared. "How YouTube," she said, deadpan. Then, lower, for him alone, "Your maintenance codes have twins. Fix it before the twins breed." His face strained a shade. He didn't ask how she knew. Smart men don't, when the answer might incriminate them or the system they've ordered not to fail. Back up the hill, the house waited, bright and blank. On her desk, when she returned, a single sheet of paper lay where no paper had been. Block letters, crude, patient. "Aurora is not for you." The room seemed to constrict, the walls adjusting their shoulders. Marina's heartbeat didn't spike, it narrowed. She folded the paper once, then again, and slid it into the notebook's back pocket somewhere in the house. A vent hissed in a rhythm she now recognized. The house was loud. Good. It meant it was still telling her where to listen. By late afternoon the lake had the gray sheen of a blade. The house settled into its evening Manus lamps at half-glow. Rugs swallowing footsteps. Eliseo's quiet choreography turning rooms into stages. Valeria's domain. Marina spent the last hour before dinner tightening the day into a single page, a clean, neutral report template. Notes on the 47 pesos that weren't about 47 pesos at all. A list of vendor codes that behaved like mirrors. She left out the paper note on her desk. Whoever had placed it there already knew English block letters. A knock. Exactly. 2 knuckles. Exactly twice. Alejandro stepped in without crossing the threshold. "You have something." "Several somethings," she said, holding up the 1-page template. "Roll-up design, daily inputs, visual flags, if numbers drift." He scanned, nodded once. "Good. Quiet is better than loud, until we know who enjoys noise." "Valeria enjoys noise. She manufactures it," Alejandro said. "Different sport." He set the page down. "And the docks?" "Your maintenance codes have twins," she said. "The twins eat crumbs. Crumbs add up." His mouth twitched approval. or the ghost of it. You handled the blue hull. Bolin 101. Daniel won't forgive you for making it look easy. He hesitated. He respects what he's forced to understand. And Natalia, she respects mirrors, he said, only when they flatter. He left with the same measured quiet, and the house took back the doorway. Valeria ran a beautiful table. The main salon glowed with artificial warmth, linen like winter sun, silver like moon water. She'd placed them like pieces Alejandro across from Marina, Natalia and Daniel as flanking cannons, Valeria at the head with a crystal pen beside her plight for the minutes. Her father's instructions, she said, tapping the pen to her notebook. This is an operations dinner. Agenda, minutes, action items. If you feel the urge to throw a glass, please announce it so I can log it properly. Eliseo poured wine. The ledger for attendance sat closed. Tonight replaced by Valeria's thinner book, the kind that remembered selective truths. Item 1, Valeria said, status check. Alejandro kept it brisk. Maintenance report by Friday. Lease renewals, in process. Daily roll-ups start tomorrow. Marina will coordinate. Natalia's smile was wine-cold. How efficient. We've imported a project manager. Marina didn't bristle. We've imported a clock. Item 2. Valeria continued, ignoring them both, the Marina discrepancy. 47 pesos. She looked to Marina with a sweetness that smelled like arsenic. Explain it to us as if we were slow. It isn't about 47 pesos, Marina said. It's about a duplicate vendor code seeded after midnight. Small amounts hide longer. The duplicate shows up in maintenance and petty cash under slightly different names. Paper ledgers are cleaner than digital. Someone hoped we'd only read the screen. Daniel's fork paused. Accusing a system that allows ghosts, Marina said. The approval trail is foggy. Valeria's pen scratched, delighted. Action audit vendor codes. Reconcile paper to digital report. Back Sunday. Assigned to Daniel. Daniel's jaw flexed. Fine. Item 3, Valeria said. Too bright. Parentage challenge. The room cooled by a degree. Natalia's eyes glittered. At last, something sensible. Voice cut low. We lose 6 months if anyone files. We lose more if we pretend blood is optional, Natalia said. There's a clinic in town. Father's orders. Let's end the theater. Valeria looked almost bored. Vote to challenge Marina's status. Contingent on all heirs submitting samples tomorrow at 10 a.m. Majority rules. Silence gathered around the word challenge like static. Marina spoke before Alejandro could. I'll submit. Alejandro's gaze snapped to her. You don't have to, I know, she said. I choose to. Natalia's smile flashed victory she hadn't earned. Then we're agreed. No, Alejandro said. We will not extend this residency because you want a cudgel. Daniel spread his hands. You heard her. She accepted. Be gracious. For once, Valeria lifted her pen, eyes bright with the pleasure of recording collisions. Minutes reflect. Marina consents to clinic visit at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Others to decide by morning. She turned the page with ceremony. Item 4. Aurora. Alejandro went still. Natalia's head cocked. Daniel frowned at the name, as if it owed him money. Valeria's smile became a blade. The house is chatty. The library is chattier. Who wants to enlighten the table? Marina kept her face as bland as porcelain. Poetry, a weather app, Alejandro said dryly. Valeria laughed, delighted to be lied to. Fine, we'll circle back when the weather changes. She closed the notebook with a little satisfied click. Action items logged. Meeting adjourned. They rose in a shuffle of chairs and swallowed temper. Natalia swept out. Daniel stalked toward his phone. Valeria lingered long enough to let Marina feel the gaze like a hand. 10 a.m., Valeria murmured. Where something that bleeds isn't. She left her crystal pen on the table like a spent dart. The library after dinner felt like a different building, older, newer, both. Marina shut the door, waited for the latch to catch, then listened. The vents whispered in a longer rhythm, the house clearing its throat. She opened the shelf with the hidden hinge. The movements practiced now, a dance with an invisible partner. The safe accepted the key with the intimacy of recognition. The dial hummed against her fingertips. The envelope she'd left inside still lay on top. She slid it with a fingernail. If they force a test, let them. The hurry to prove blood often disguises the fear of proving motive. Bring coffee to the clinic staff. They remember kindness better than names. A postscript. Do not block the hearth. Great. The flu needs breath. Fire is a lazy thief. She almost smiled. Then she smelled it faint, tin-sweet. Smoke before smoke, the suggestion of it. Marina turned. The hearth was dark, but the grate's lower vents pulsed warm. Someone had stuffed something thin into the slot's paper, enough to choke the draw. If a fire had been lit earlier, the room would have filled with carbon faster than anyone could. Explain a headache. She crouched, slid the flat brass key along the vent to flick the clog free. Ash kissed her knuckles. A wisp of gray lifted and vanished into the flue like a bad idea reconsidering itself. When she stood, she wasn't alone. I do love problem solvers, Valeria said from the doorway, voice honeyed. They keep me from getting bored. You left the pen on purpose, Marina said. Not a question. Valeria's smile approved the deduction. Props matter. They send people to the right page. What page am I on? The one where you say yes to tests and no to panic? Valeria's gaze flicked to the safe she pretended not to see. Careful with the house. It listens. It talks, Marina said. You're just not its favorite. Valeria's eyes warmed, almost admiration or appetite. Tomorrow. Then, when the door clicked shut behind her, the room's hum came back like oxygen. Marina reset the dial, slid the shelf into place, and only then let herself exhale. The key was warm again, as if it had opinions. On the desk sat the leather notebook where she'd left it. She reached for it and froze. The elastic band was hooked the way she always hooked it, the corner crease the way she'd made it, but the weight was wrong by a whisper. She opened to the middle, pages intact. She thumbed the back pocket where she'd slid the block note. Gone. In its place, a different scrap, same crude capital hand. Listen less, obey more. Her fingers didn't shake. She folded the scrap and fed it to the grate, watching it turn to a brief, black flower, and then to nothing. On the shelf above, a photograph frame faced the room. Arturo at the hearth, dated in blue ink. She glanced toward the safe, toward the matching photographs she'd left inside earlier. When she checked, the envelope and notebook were there. The photograph was not. Someone hadn't wanted to burn the house. They wanted to edit its memory. Morning opened like a clean blade. By 9:30, the convoy slid into town, paint and money reflecting in pharmacy windows. The clinic sat on a corner beside a bakery, the kind of place where lives began, ended, and were measured in paper forms. Inside, white walls, the hum of old refrigerators, plastic chairs that believed in humility. A nurse at the desk looked up with the calm of someone who'd seen every version of emergency. Her beige red Reina. Alejandro spoke first, voice low. We have an appointment under Reina scanned the screen. Not impressed, not unimpressed. Samples at 10. There's coffee in the lobby. Not necessary, Natalia said, already irritated by oxygen. Marina set a carrier on the counter. 5 cups, all different lids. Necessity is a greedy word, she said. Reina, which one is yours? Reina's mouth tipped surprise, then a private decision. The one that says cardamom. Marina slid it across. Doctor on duty. Dr. Pineda, Reina said. She likes cinnamon. And rules. Good combination, Marina said. Daniel checked his watch. Can we get this over with? Valeria took a seat like a queen in exile. Do try not to faint. Brother, it stains. The waiting room filled itself with the small emergencies of other people. A toddler with a bandage shaped like a star. A man with a cough that shook coins out of his pockets. Marina watched the door behind the desk where staff disappeared into their practiced efficiencies. She also watched the hallway camera pale dome tilted slightly off-center, as if it had decided to be lazy. At 10 sharp, Reina called them one by one. Natalia went first, chin high, wrist rigid when the phlebotomist tied the tourniquet. She didn't flinch, but she looked away. Daniel swaggered through bravado with the accuracy of someone who'd rehearsed it. Valeria drifted in and out like perfume and left a laugh behind. Alondro rolled his sleeve, veins obedient, eyes on the needle without blinking. When it was Marina's turn, Reina led her to a narrow room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and cinnamon. Dr. Pineda was young enough to still be underestimated, eyes sharp behind clear frames. "You consent to testing," Pineda said, reading the form as a ritual, "and to chain of custody protocols as per the court's guidelines." "I consent," Marina said, "and I'd like a copy of the custody log signed by both staff on hand." Pineda looked up, a glint of respect. "You've done this before?" "I've watched people lose things they already proved," Marina said. Reina labeled the vials with a steady hand date, time, code. Marina watched the labeler. Not pre-printed, not cheap, the kind that didn't smear if tears fell on it, which they did, sometimes. "Any concerns we should know about?" Pineda asked. "Just one," Marina said. "Your hallway camera is tired. If chain of custody ever walks down that hall, it might want an audience." Reina followed her gaze, smiled like someone who hadn't smiled yet today. "I'll wake it up." The needle went in. Marina watched the tube fill dark cherry, precise weight. She breathed steady. Instructions existed for a reason. When she stepped back into the lobby, Natalia was mid-argument with Alejandro. "You shouldn't have let her agree," Natalia hissed. "She decided," Alejandro said. "Exactly my point." Valeria stretched, satisfied. "We've donated to science." "How virtuous." Reina returned to the desk with a clipboard. "Copies of the custody logs," she said. She set 5 envelopes down. "Results in 5 business days. Or 3, if the courier believes in hurry." "Couriers don't believe in anything," Daniel said. "They believe in signatures," Reina said. "UNBOTHERED. As they turned to go, a man in a gray suit slid through the clinic doors without looking at anyone. "Too polished for this street, too bland for this family." He paused just long enough at the desk to leave a card and a folded something money, then disappeared into the hallway that led toward the lab. Marina glanced at Reina. Reina's face didn't change. Her hand moved, slow and clean, pushing the folded bill back under the card, then pushing both into a drawer with a firm click. When her eyes lifted, they found Marina's and held. "Message received. Not here. Outside." The bakery air smelled like sugar and heat. Alejandro fell into step beside Marina. "You saw him." "I saw Reina not take what he brought." "Good," he said, which was praise in his language. They reached the cars. Daniel slammed a door as if it were responsible for proof. Natalia spoke to her reflection in the rearview mirror with the intensity of prayer. Valeria rolled down a window and let the town look at her. On the way back up the mountain, Marina watched the road shoulder. A pickup idled at the curve near the tree line, hooted up theatrically. The man leaning against it had the loose posture of someone whose job was to wait. She memorized his face without looking like she was memorizing his face. At the house, Eliseo met them with the ledger, as if it were communion. They signed time initials and dispersed. The day wanted to settle. The house refused. In her room, Marina opened the leather notebook and added a line under Aurora House. "Clinic staff. Reina, ally Potentia. Pineda rules. Cinnamon. Gray suit. Attempted bribe rejected. Security. Camera fixed. Check courier. Protocol." She turned to the back and wrote 2 more words in a margin Arturo had left to clean. "Photo missing. A knock. 3 knuckles. Once." Valeria. Marina opened the door partway. Valeria leaned on the jamb, a freckle of sun on her wrist where bracelets didn't reach. "Good show at the clinic," Valeria said. "Coffee is a language. You speak it well." "I speak survival," Marina said. Valeria considered that, then let her voice drop into velvet. "You're careful. I admire careful. But careful people sometimes forget to be fast." She straightened. "I'll be in the library now." "The house is loud," Valeria said, and left. Marina waited until her pulse stopped trying to be an alarm. Then she took the key and the notebook and went to the library, because not going would have been louder. Valeria stood at the hearth, hair a dark line against the stone. She didn't turn. "Did you know father staged photographs?" she asked, conversational. "If he didn't like the light, he invented it." Marina stepped close enough to see the frame on the mantel. "Arturo, young," the same scrawled blue date as the copy she'd found in the safe. The difference here was invisible until you wanted it. The angle of his left hand, the way the notebook in his grip showed no title. "He edited the memory," Valeria said. "Or someone learned to edit him." Marina slid the shelf, dialed the safe by feel. The envelope and leather book were where she'd left them. The photograph lay on top again. The original. Arturo's hand in this version showed the embossed word Aurora on the notebook's cover, like a quiet confession. Whoever took it, Marina said, put it back, meaning Valeria asked, meaning they thought better, or got watched. Marina looked up toward the vents, dark mouth. Oh, the house got loud. Valeria's smile returned small, sharp. I do love when houses have opinions. She moved to go, then paused, as if remembering something that might sting pleasantly. By the way, Daniel's vendor audit will hurt him, or help him, if he chooses to be someone else for a day. And Natalia, Valeria tilted her head, Natalia will choose mirrors, she always does. And you, Marina asked. Valeria's eyes warmed with an honest delight. I choose entertainment. When she left, the door eased shut like a secret resettling. Marina looked down at the photograph. Arturo's face held a challenge no one had earned yet. She slid the picture back into the safe, closed the dial, and rested her forehead lightly against the wood of the moving shelf. The house hummed in the bones of it, back in her room. The paper that had warned Aurora, is not for you, was gone from the notebook's pocket again. In its place, a new square, same hand, same block letters, run while the paper still says your name. She folded the square twice and put it under the brass key. The weight steadied both. She sat, opened the notebook to water, and began calling numbers, next to names in towns the Empire had never visited. I'm looking for Alma, she said into the third ring. I'm calling about a pilot we can make bigger. If someone wanted her to run, they were late. The house was loud. The world outside it was louder. Marina planned to be the loudest thing in both. By sunrise, the lake had traded steel for silver. Marina sat at the desk with the leather notebook open to water, dialing numbers in towns that rarely appeared on Villalobos maps. She spoke to Alma in Oaxaca about filters that didn't clog, to Jacinto in Sonora about a school's solar pump that worked until the battery didn't, to a woman who only gave her name as Luz and said, if he promised this, I'll believe it when metal arrives, not when paper does. Marina wrote metal, not paper, in the margin, and underlined, before he broke the seal. A voice drifted from the doorway, light and apologetic. Forgive the intrusion, Martin said, stepping into the salon, rain on his shoulders like glitter. I thought it prudent to be here. He smiled at Marina, over the envelope he hadn't touched. I do so hate surprises. The salon froze around Martin Valverde's smile. Rain dripped off his coat onto the parquet, slow and precise, each drop louder than it should have been. Alejandro straightened first. You weren't invited. Invitations are a formality, Martin replied, smooth as lacquer. I'm here because the will makes me guardian of execution. These envelopes represent power. Power attracts tampering. I protect against tampering. Marina saw the envelope trembling only at the Alejandro's grip, not the seal's fault. The red wax bore the clinic's stamp, perfect down to the swirl at its tail. Yet her skin hummed like it knew something the wax didn't. Chain of custody doesn't mention you until the end, Marina said. Her voice didn't rise, it cut. Why did you sign a form you never touched? Martinez's eyes flicked quick, then stilled. Redundancy, forgery, Marina corrected. Daniel shifted, as though weighing whether to side with blood or convenience. Natalia crossed her arms, poison simmering. Valeria only smiled, bright and cruel, waiting for the first drop of blood. Alejandro set the envelope down. We open it now, with or without you. Martin took a step closer. If you open it without me, you risk invalidation. Months more delay. Courts love delay. The house groaned in the pause that followed. Marina glanced at the painting above the mantel, the one whose corner she had tapped in the hidden passage hours earlier. She pictured the mic still sleeping in the safe, gagged in linen. The house had listened, but now it was theirs alone. She stepped to the table, laid her palm flat on the envelope, over Alejandro's hand. His pulse leaped against her skin. I propose transparency, she said. We open it in the library, with cameras rolling, a record no one can contest. Alejandro caught the cue instantly. Agreed. He turned his gaze to Martin. You'll stand there too. If you're so lawful, you'll want witnesses. For the first time, Martin's composure cracked not visibly, but in the way his tongue darted once to wet his lips. He bowed, shallow. Very well. The library smelled of wax and rain. Eliseo set up the small security camera, usually pointed at the gate. Its red light blinked alive. Marina angled the lens at the table, ensuring no one's hands strayed off dash frame. Alejandro broke the seal with a single pull. The wax snapped like bone. Inside, 4 folded sheets, 1 for each heir, and a 5th smaller note. Eliseo distributed them, reluctant to touch more than he must. Marina unfolded hers. The clinic's letterhead gleamed, sharp and official. DNA analysis. Arturo Villalobos, confirmed father of Marina Contreras. Her throat tightened, but she didn't falter. The world had shifted in an instant, but it was an instant she had already lived in her mind, in every look, every dismissal, every suspicion she'd endured. Across the table, Alejandro read his silently, shoulders steady. Natalia's nostrils flared as she scanned hers. Daniel pinched his letter like it stung. Valeria hummed, amused. Then Marina opened the smaller note. Arturo's handwriting. Mistakable, spiky, urgent. If they resist, remind them the blood is not the test. The proof is whether you can hold this house together when all others would let it split. Her eyes burned. She passed the note to Alejandro. He read it, jaw tightening, then handed it around. Silence rippled in its wake. This doesn't change business, Natalia said finally, brittle. She's still untested. Alejandro's voice cut clean. It changes everything. She's my sister. She has standing. She stays. Natalia slammed her hand on the table. You always wanted a pawn, now you have one. No, Marina said quietly. Now he has an equal. Daniel laughed, thin and sharp. Equal. Do you know how quickly Rivas will swoop if he smells division? Then don't give him the scent, Marina replied. She met Alejandro's eyes. If Arturo's measure was whether we hold the house together, then we do. Not for him, not for legacy, because vultures circle when we fight. Valeria clapped softly, mocked applause. Oh, I do love a speech. But even she didn't deny it. Martin shifted, uncomfortable under the camera's gaze. Well, the matter is settled. You have blood, you have paper, but blood and paper are only the start. Your role ends here, Alejandro said flatly. Career, your resignation to the court, will manage the rest. For the first time, Martin looked small. The rain had soaked through his coat, and without polish he was only a man with damp shoulders in a room that had stopped needing him. He left without another word. Later, when the others dispersed, Natalia to plot, Daniel to brood, Valeria to sip her triumph, Marina remained in the library. Alejandro lingered by the window. You were right, he said, voice low, about transparency, about the culpable. He stopped, beginnings caught in his throat. Marina closed the notebook Arturo had left her. The word water still underlined, but now it felt different, not just scarcity, but current, motion. You didn't see me before tonight, she said. I see you now, Alejandro answered. Lightning split the clouds outside, and the lake shivered silver. For a moment, Marina imagined Arturo watching, satisfied not because blood had been proven, but because the cage he built had forced them to see what they might become. 6 months remained, but already the game had changed. Marina was no longer invisible Shiva's Villalobos. She was current, and the house, loud as it was, finally carried her voice. End.